So you're nervous about your check ride. Don't worry, that's absolutely normal. If you're anything like me, you've been studying and studying, you've done a few mock oral check rides, and for some reason you still feel anxious. So take a look at this mock oral check ride that I did with one of my CFIs to help me prepare. This was about 2 days before my actual check ride, and I went in and passed. Hopefully this helps set you at ease a bit. If you're able to answer most of these questions, then you're ready. If you're struggling to get through most of these questions, then you need to hit the books and study a little bit more. Relax. There's tons of information. You're not expected to know everything, but you are expected to have a good understanding and know where to find the answers to the questions that you do not know. So familiarize yourself with the FAR aim as well as your POH for the aircraft that you'll be taking your check ride in. Now, let's get into it.
What kind of inspections do we need to have for our airplanes?
Aviate is the acronym we need.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm
By the
looking
way,
up. Wait a minute. Yes.
How can you explain to me what is an AD in one word?
Okay. Airworthiness directive in one word.
Yeah. Recall.
Okay. Perfect.
That's exactly what it is.
Perfect. Yep. I was going to give a full explanation, but that's it. Recall is the one word that explains
It's
it.
recall by the manufacturer.
Yep.
That's it.
Cool. I like that. We have any ADs out? No. VORs, that is for IFR only, must be checked every 30 days. I's for my inspections. I have a 100-hour inspection if my aircraft is for hire only. Otherwise, we've got an annual inspection to be done every 12 months. All planes must have it. Next is my altimeter. That must be checked every 24 calendar months, and that is also IFR only.
Is it?
Let's see. No, it's not. It's my pedostatic systems IFR only. This is all aircrafts. That is required for everything. My altimeter must be checked every 24 calendar months. My transponder must also be checked every 24 calendar months. E is my ELT. ELT is every 12 calendar months, 50% of battery life, expired, or 1 hour of cumulative use. And then for S, my pedostatic system, that is back to 24 calendar months, and that is IFR only.
Okay, now let's say I have an ELT and it broke down. I took it out of the airplane. Can I fly without it?
There are a long list of rules and regulations regarding that. I don't have them all memorized, but I will rattle off a few of them for you. No civil aircraft may fly outside. So you can fly without it if you're going to be within 50 miles of your...
The answer is yes. You can fly without it.
Perfect.
Why? And it's pretty stupid. If you take out the ELT, you have 90 days to fix it and put it back. It doesn't make any sense, but I was asked that on my commercial check ride, and I was like, you know what? It's stupid, but the answer is yes if it's up to 90 days. And then, as you said, there's a whole regulation about it. But
okay.
The short answer is yes. Now, something I wanted to ask you, you said, okay, you know how to do some maintenance. Can you do your own 100 hours inspection?
No, I do not have the necessary certification to do it. I am not in...
So what can you do to the airplane? What can you fix?
I can do things that are, I believe, routine or preventative maintenance. Things like changing my oil. I can change my spark plugs. I can change the little discs or parts that would be part of the suspension, like the little rubber discs that some planes have. I can change things like lights. I can reupholster the seats, fix holes in that. Very simple and very light things that do not involve...
Where can you find information about it? It's chapter 8 on the POH.
Okay, chapter 8 will list out all the things that as a...
It's called supplemental maintenance. Now, are you familiar with the airplane's load factor limit?
I do not have the number memorized.
Like 3.5.
Okay, let me take a look. Load factor. Yeah. And that'll be in chapter 2 of the POH, limitations in placarding.
Yes. And honestly, by the time you memorize it, please forget it. Like, you only need for the check ride, and that's it. What kind of fuel do we use?
We use 100 low lead. Aviation.
What would happen if I use the 95, for example?
If you use the wrong fuel, you could damage the engine. Things like detonation and overheating could occur. If you're gaining value from this, make sure you like and subscribe and comment down below. Let me know what questions you didn't know, what questions you knew the answer to, and what things you just hadn't really thought about before.
How many magnetos do we have?
2, left and right.
Okay, and how many cylinders?
4 cylinders.
What
Each
about
cylinder,
spark plugs? How many
each
spark
cylinder has
plugs?
2 spark plugs, so a total of 8.
How many?
Each cylinder, we have 4 cylinders, 2 spark plugs per cylinder, so a total of 8.
Perfect. If he asks you about anything like an encoder altimeter, for some reason, it's connected to the transponder.
Copy. Okay.
All it does, it makes your altimeter talk with the transponder, talk with the controller.
So altimeter talks to the transponder, talks to the controller.
Yeah,
Cool.
and it's called encoding altimeter. What makes the airplane create lift?
So the differential in pressure between air going over the wing versus air going below the wing. That is what.
Perfect. What kind of effects does our prop have on our airplane? There are 4 of those.
Slipstream traveling around the plane, coming from obviously the propeller.
The idea with the P factor is
Mhm.
that the solid goes down, goes a little bit faster, it creates a bigger bite,
Right.
and it just
And it pushes the plane the other way, equal and opposite reaction. Cool.
yeah.
And then for the gyroscopic precession, that has to do with the movement of a gyroscope, a moving object with mass, which is what our propeller is. If you added a force to that gyroscope, it would precess 90 degrees forward in the direction of its travel.
Now, the reason why it doesn't make sense is because our airplane doesn't really get affected by it.
Okay.
But what kinds of airplanes do get affected by it? The tailplanes, because their prop is like that. Your prop is like that.
Okay. Okay.
So their prop actually has some kind of bend towards the backwards,
Yeah.
and that one can actually make them spin.
Copy.
Yeah, so even though they teach it, it doesn't really affect on our airplanes, but that's fine. Do you know how to calculate VA? The idea with the VA, honestly, is not maneuvering speed. It's maximum maneuvering speed. Why is that? Up to that speed, you're more likely to stall before you exceed the airplane G limitations. If you're faster than it and you pull as hard as you can, you're going to break the wings before you get a chance to stall. So the stall is kind of like a protection layer, which tells you, hey, if you're below this, you won't be able to break the airplane's wings before you stall.
Okay.
What is your maximum gross weight?
Maximum gross weight 2,400 pounds.
Is it an R model?
It's a P model.
Okay. What are the stages of a spin?
Stages of a spin, I believe there are 4. You'll have like the initial part of the spin. Then you will have the incipient stage where you've got that's like the first 3 turns. Then what is the term for a full spin? And obviously the last one will be recovery, hopefully.
Developed.
Okay, cool. Developed.
By the way, why do you need to know it? No idea. How do you recover?
The acronym for that would be PARE, P-A-R-E. So you're going to go power back. The next letter is A, which is ailerons, neutral. R, rudder opposite the direction of the spin. And then E is your elevator. So your elevator is going to be nose forward to pick up speed.
Okay. What is the effect of a forward CG versus an aft CG, and which one would you prefer?
All right. Forward versus aft CG. So for a forward CG, plane is going to have a higher stall speed, slower cruise, and be more stable. For an aft CG, we're going to have, okay, and then lastly, you're going to need the reason why you're going to have a higher stall is because you are going to need a higher or steeper angle of attack to maintain level flight. So you're already closer to your critical angle of attack.
If that was a CFI checkride, I would be very happy that you said it, because it's correct. By the way, as a PPL, you're not supposed to know it, so I'm just saying.
Okay. And then for aft,
you're good
pretty much
you know that.
Yeah. For aft, it's pretty much it's the opposite. You're going to have lower stall speed, higher cruise, and you're going to be less stable longitudinally.
Perfect. Which basically means recovery from a stall. That's what it means.
Okay.
Now, let's say you want to carry passengers. What do you need to do prior to that? Are there any restrictions or currency or proficiency?
Yes. So in order to carry passengers, if we're talking about the daytime, I must have made 3 landings within the previous 90 days. And if I'm flying my normal Cessna 172, it's just 3 landings. If I'm in a tailwheel tail dragger, landings have to be to a full stop.
Yeah, and at night.
Okay, you'd like to know about night as well? No problem. At night, the rule is the same. It needs to be 3 landings within the previous 90 days, except these landings must be to a full stop.
So it's not just landings, it's also takeoffs.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's just something that it's the regulation. Now, usually you will have the same amount of takeoffs and landings, but yeah, I tell you where the problem lies. I have a sim captain, like I had 2 sim partners. One of them was a captain for Delta. Now, they were flying the Airbus 350. And the problem is they would have like a flight to Singapore. Now, there's only 5 per month. So they're probably doing 4 of them. And what would happen is people would fight who would get the landing because you have a crew of 4 people, right? Because you have a standby crew. The flight is 15 hours, so somebody got to sleep. And what ends up happening is people lose their proficiency to land. So once you miss the 90 days, until you go to the sim, you cannot do takeoffs and landings. So it creates a situation where only half of the crew can do that.
Wow. Okay.
Are you familiar with the TEAM acronym?
The TEAM acronym, yes. So transfer, eliminate, accept, and mitigate.
Perfect. Okay, and one thing that is important for check rides is sometimes you know a lot. You're like, this is the subject that I studied. You answer what you've been asked. That's it.
Okay. Keep it simple. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that. I was told by my own instructor, no, shut up. That's it.
Okay.
Even though I spend memorizing all those, no, shut up. Nobody asked.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about 5 hazardous attitudes.
Impulsivity is do something. Anti-authorities, don't tell me what to do. Invulnerability, won't happen to me. Resignation, what's the use? And macho is I can do it.
Yeah, but what is the antidote for macho?
Oh, I don't know. What is the antidote for macho?
For macho is taking chances is foolish.
Resignation.
You're not helpless. You can make a difference. And I've seen it in the sim that we had the dual engine failure. We made it to the airport. Like, just because you have an engine failure doesn't mean like the flight is over. And what's the next thing?
Invulnerability.
So it could happen to me. The next one is anti-authority, is follow the rules. They are usually right. And the last one, impulsivity, is not so fast. Think first. Are you familiar with what part of the eye is used for night vision?
What part of the eye is used for night vision? Okay, we use our cones in the daytime and rods at night.
Perfect. And how much time does it take to adapt to night vision?
I believe the estimate is about 20 minutes.
Okay. Can you walk me through some of the illusions that we have?
Sure. For the illusions, we have an acronym we'll use, ICE flags. So the I is inversion illusion, C is Coriolis illusion, the E is elevator illusion, F is false horizon, LAGS. A is autokinesis, G is graveyard, spin or spiral, and then the S is somotographic illusion.
Okay, can you explain somotographic illusion to me?
The somotographic illusion has to do with speeding up or slowing down. If you are, for instance, you level off from a climb, you're pulling power back and you slow down, it makes you lean forward. And that feeling gives you the illusion that you are descending, which would then cause you, the pilot, to pitch up and potentially stall the aircraft. And then the opposite would do obviously the opposite. If you speed up, it puts you back in your chair, gives you the illusion that you're climbing, and then you could pitch the airplane down incorrectly, causing undue hazard.
Perfect. Walk me through the kinds of hypoxia we have.
All right, so for hypoxia, we have hypoxic hypoxia, which is basically low ambient air pressure. Things like high altitude can do that. So for above, say, 12,500 feet, that is an example. You have hypemic hypoxia, which is caused by things like anemia. So the air is available, but you're not able to diffuse that air across your lungs. Then you've got histotoxic hypoxia, which would be an example of if you were using drugs or alcohol or long-term smoking. Oxygen's available, oxygen get through your lungs, but your blood can't use it. Then lastly, you have stagnant hypoxia, which basically has to do with the function of the heart. Your heart isn't able to pump the blood adequately. That could be due to things like high G forces, or you're aging, your heart's not working properly.
Okay, now you talked about the 12,500. So what are the oxygen supplemental requirements?
All right, so supplemental oxygen requirements above 12,500 feet for 30 minutes or more, crew must be on oxygen. The next altitude, well, it's really 12,000 to 14,000 feet, 12,500 to 14,000 feet. Now, 14,000 feet to 15,000 feet, all crew members must be on supplemental oxygen at all times above between these altitudes. And then above 15,000 feet, oxygen must be made available for all passengers on the plane. It's their choice whether they use it or not.
Perfect. Okay, now as far as you said, I think the isotoxic one, how do you usually get carbon monoxide when flying?
Carbon monoxide poisoning would be caused by an exhaust leak in your engine, and then that would either come through, off the engine and then come through your vents.
What specific system can make it come to my cabin?
The heat, using cabin heat, because
Exactly.
cabin heat pulls the heat off of the exhaust manifold specifically, and that's where that hot air comes from for the heating system.
Perfect. Okay, now let's say, well, actually, you know the answer, but I'm still going to ask you because you made a video about it. What should be the gap between drinking and flying?
So the gap between drinking and flying is 8 hours. Or
Are there any exceptions?
what was that? Other
Are there any
exemptions?
exceptions where I
Other
need more than 8
rules.
hours?
Okay, so 8 hours, but the other part of the rule would be your blood alcohol content needs to be below 0.04. Also, you can't be
Perfect.
having any symptoms.
Do we have any restrictions after scuba diving?
Yes, after scuba diving. So if you have a uncontrolled ascent, you've got 12 hours and 24 hours for any controlled ascents.
Okay.
Also, there's a altitude restriction. I believe that altitude restriction is 8,000 feet. If you're climbing
Yeah.
above 8,000 feet, it's 24 hours regardless.
Okay, that's correct. Are you familiar with the time of useful consciousness at different altitudes?
Time of useful consciousness at different altitudes, no.
Okay, then I recommend that you go over it. The main idea is that 40,000 feet, you don't have much time, but you don't need to know those numbers. Just look it up, maybe print it for yourself. And if they ask you, be like, yeah, I have a card that I always like to use.
Okay.
I don't
So
know where you need to
time
know
of
this.
useful consciousness at different altitudes.
Yeah, it's in the pilot flying handbook and the medical part. It's the same
Okay.
area, but yeah. Okay, let's say that you decide to move away. How many days do you have until you need to let the FAA know about it?
You have 30 days.
Perfect. Can you explain to me what's the difference between currency and proficiency?
Okay. Simply put, currency is are you legal? Proficiency is are you safe? So we talked about night landings. You need, in order to carry passengers, say my wife Tatum, I would need 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop within the previous 90 days. Let's say I'm at 65 or 70 days. I'm current, but am I really proficient? It's a very different thing and different illusions at night, how far you are from the ground, etc.
Okay, sounds good. Can you explain to me the different illusions between having an upslope runway and downslope runway and how does it affect you?
Okay, so for runway slopes, if you have a upward sloping runway, what you're looking at is the near point of the runway. So therefore, you would believe that the runway is further away from you. And when you believe the runway is further away, you will come in at too low of an approach. The opposite is true when you have a downward sloping runway. Looking at the nearest part of the runway, you believe that the runway is closer to you than it is. And when you believe it's closer to you, you are going to come in at a higher approach.
Perfect. Now, would you prefer to take off upslope or downslope?
I actually don't know the answer
Why?
to that question.
So what I found out, and it's a tricky question because it depends on terrain. There is an airport. I drove by it when I left California, and somewhere up in the mountains. The thing is that if you're going upslope, it's harder to accelerate.
Right.
So now I would like to think about it vice versa. What is easier to land? Obviously something that goes upslope because it's slowing me down.
Right.
So I want to take off downhill. It will allow me to accelerate earlier and then rotate earlier.
Okay.
Can you walk me through high and low pressure systems as far as weather?
High pressure system, you're going to have things like air won't be as typically as turbulent. You're going to have what's the word?
Just the pressure, like how does it go right?
Oh,
in,
copy, easy. All right. So for a high pressure system, it moves downward, outward, and clockwise. For a low pressure system, it's going to move inward, upward, and counterclockwise.
Yes, and the best way to remember is to use a water bottle.
A water bottle. Never
I'll
heard
show
that.
you.
Okay.
So if I have high pressure,
Mm-hmm.
it's going down,
Okay.
clockwise, and they just say outward, but it does, I don't know why, where comes the outward. But
Okay.
if I have low pressure on, it will go counterclockwise and up.
Okay.
That's how I remember. Like every single checkride, I'm like out and up. So
Okay.
what kind of weather can I expect from a cold front and a warm front?
All right. So coming in with a cold front, you can potentially expect things like cumulus clouds and thunderstorms, and the precipitation that you would get would be like showery precipitation. And then coming in with a warm front, you would expect things potentially like poor visibility that would kind of sit around, so they can bring in like fog or haze that would sit and linger. You would have, if you had a precipitation, it would be like a constant precipitation rather than showery, and you would usually have like less winds than
Which
a
one's going to have a better visibility?
better visibility on the ground. We're going to have with a cold front, because a warm front would bring fog and haze.
Which one will have stratus clouds?
Stratus clouds is likely to come with a warm front.
Perfect. Are you familiar with the chart with all the symbols and bullshit?
Yes, I've been looking at that. They're kind of weird, right? So you have like a little weird R-looking thing that means thunderstorms. The little
Yes.
triangle like this is showers. For snow, you've got like, the little cross T's. Rain is the little periods.
I'll say try memorizing it, but if you can't, just have it printed. So he asks you, well, how are you going to decode it? Oh, I always have the printed copy.
Okay, cool.
What is the standard laps rate per 1,000 feet?
For every 1,000 foot you go vertically, you're going to lose 2 degrees of temperature. And then,
Fahrenheit?
what was that?
Is that Fahrenheit or Celsius?
It's going to be 2 degrees in Celsius.
Okay. What is the definition of a ceiling?
The definition of a ceiling is the lowest broken or overcast layer.
What is a verga?
What is a what?
Verga?
I have no idea. I've never heard that term before.
Perfect. He likes to ask that. So the definition of a verga is rain that evaporates before it hits the ground. What it actually means, there are very strong downdrafts.
Okay.
I never heard about verga until I met Rich. So just a very strong downdraft, and it just looks like somebody just opened like the shower and you just see like a block falling down.
Okay.
What else? Can you walk me through the kinds of fog?
All right. So for kinds of fog, we have advection fog, radiation fog, upslope fog, and steam fog.
You also have freezing fog, just so you know.
Okay. And freezing fog.
You and I, we had one day there was freezing fog. I don't know if you remember. How would you define a density altitude? What does it actually mean?
So if we're talking definition versus literal meaning, simple meaning says it's the altitude the airplane thinks it's operating at. Now,
That's good enough.
Okay.
Yeah. What is our VY and VX, and what is the difference?
Okay, so our VY is going to be our best speed for climb. So it's going to give us our best rate of climb, meaning over time we would climb faster. So, in the next, if it's in 1 minute, let's say we climb 1,000 feet, that is going to be our best rate of climb, and our y speed or vy speed in this particular plane is 76 knots versus my vx is like 57, and that is my best angle of climb. So that will get me away from the ground the fastest. If I'm doing short field takeoff, worried about trees, I want to climb at my best angle, get away from the ground.
Perfect. So let's say you're taking off from an airport that has trees in front of it. And you're about to take off. What are you going to do different?
So I would go with a short field takeoff, the whole procedure, as well. If I know I've got a 50-foot obstacle toward the end of my runway, I'm going to check in my POH to make sure, first of all, do I have enough runway? Is it even possible for my plane to make this based on my weight, the winds, etc.? I determine, yes, there's enough. Awesome. So I'm going to put in 10 notches of flaps. I'm going to try to use as much of the runway as possible. I'm going to come out as far as I can. And then I am going to stop the aircraft, apply full power, take off down the runway. My aircraft will lift off I want to lift off at 50 knots and climb directly out at my VX, which is 60 knots.
Okay. What kind of airspace is Concord?
Concord is a Delta airspace.
Do we have any speed limitations in a Class Delta?
Speed limitations, you're not allowed to go over 200 knots.
What about a Class Charlie?
I believe Class Charlie is also the same of 200 knots. It's Class
What about Class Bravo?
250 knots.
Why do you need to know it?
So I'm just checking in. We're about halfway through this Mock Oral Checkride. How's it going for you so far? Let me know down in the comments below. Have you gotten about 80% of these questions correct so far? If not, I hope you're writing down the questions that you don't know the answers to or didn't know the answers to, and make sure you look them up in your FAR-AIM as well as the POH of your aircraft. Now let's get back into it.
If we do a 60 degrees bank, how much G-forces will we have?
At 60 degrees bank, I think the G-force doubles.
Okay, it's going to be 2. What if I do 90 degrees?
If you do 90 degrees, we're probably going to fall out of the sky, but I think it would be up exponentially. So it would more than double.
Yeah, there's no limit. Okay, can you fly through MOA?
A military operating area, yes, you can.
What about restricted?
Restricted areas, you are technically also allowed to fly through restricted areas. You may need clearance, but you can fly through them.
Okay, what about the prohibited?
You are not allowed to fly through prohibited areas, which was weird because I remember when we were studying, I was like, wait, I thought prohibited versus restricted. Restricted sounds more like no go, and prohibited is like, you shouldn't, but no.
So progressive taxi is when the weather is too bad and you're in an unfamiliar airport, you can request the tower to walk you through it. So they'll be like, hey, turn left here, stop, keep going straight, stop. And if really needed, they can send you a truck that will take you with them.
Oh, wow.
Like with flashing lights. And it might sound a bit extra. They use it in bigger airports more than you think. How would you identify the airport beacon lights?
So you want like the different colors of all of them? So
no, just ours.
Oh, ours is going to be green and white. Alternating rotating beacon.
What is a TFR?
A TFR is a temporary flight restriction. Perfect example here. We get them all the time when the president's in town.
Somebody got to pay for the elections, and everybody here gets money. So let's say I want to take you tomorrow to fly with me the Cirrus SR-22 Tango, fully fancy, 300 horsepower, blah, 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 blah. But do you have any limitations before you fly that?
Do I can't be PIC of that aircraft. No. You are, being that you are a flight instructor, SR-20.
Why can't you?
What was that?
If you pass your PPL.
It's that is a high performance aircraft. It's over 200 horsepower. So I would need a appropriate training and logbook endorsement from a CFI. But that's Perfect. To be PIC. I could go with you and be in the plane, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the high performance. And then another thing, it's a glass cockpit, which is, there's no endorsement for that, but you need proper training for it.
Right.
Okay. What is a standard rate turn?
A standard rate turn, we have a little monitor on our attitude, our turn coordinator, and it has got a little dashed line. And basically, a standard rate turn, time wise, would take 1 minute to take a full circle.
Take a full circle?
Well, to turn back around, go 360 degrees is going to take 1 minute, right?
2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. It basically equals to 3 degrees per second.
Okay.
Okay. And what kind of class medical do you have?
Class 3.
Okay. How long is it valid for?
I'm under 40 years of age, thankfully. So I've got 60 calendar months or 5 years.
Okay. Now, let's say you decide to get a class medical, a class 1 medical.
Okay.
How long is it going to be valid for?
I'm under 40 years of age, so I've got 6 months. I'm sorry, I'm under 40, so I've got 1 year. If I was over 40, I would have 6 months. And then after said period, it then basically gives me class 3 privileges.
Perfect. It basically skips on class 2.
Right.
What are the required documents that we need?
Required documents I need in the aircraft: aero, airworthiness certificate. I'm going to need my registration. Going to need a radio certificate if it's going to be flown internationally. My POH, operating handbook that came with the plane, and then the weight and balance, not the one that I'm calculating for us to fly, but the actual weight and balance of the aircraft itself, which will also be there with the POH.
How long is the registration valid for?
That changed recently. It's 7 years.
Yeah. I was actually a flight instructor. The date was changed. And I was like, 3 years. They're like, no, 7. I was like, what? But yeah, it was at the beginning of 2023.
Right. Quick question. How big a deal is Rich going to make about that?
You want my recommendation? You have a FAR aim included in your FOR-Flight subscription.
Yep. So mention that I have that and it's up to date. Cool. I'll do that.
If he doesn't notice it, great. If he asks you, by the way, I was only asked once to open the FAR aim on my commercial check ride, and I had FOR-Flight. I just Googled the question and it gave me the answer.
Okay.
It's way easier than navigating in the book, and I did it for every check ride I ever had. So, are you familiar with a biannual flight review?
Yes, a biannual flight review. So every 24 calendar months, a pilot must have a biannual flight review, which just includes ground and flight with a flight instructor who will then sign off in your logbook the endorsement. Or the other options are you get an endorsement. I get my multi, I get a new certification, something of the sort that will extend that period from that date.
I never did a biannual flight review, so.
Right.
And I'm actually, my license is going to expire on July, but I'm having a check ride next week, so 3 sets.
Yep.
But I do have to renew my medical. Okay. Are you familiar with the I'm Safe model?
Yes, I'm Safe checklist has to do with my personal check of my own body and self. So my I is, do I have any illnesses? Am I sick, congested, or whatever the case may be? Am I taking any medications that could have any effects on my body or cognitive abilities? S, am I under any stress? Outside stress. Is my mortgage paid? Am I able to go to work? X, Y, and Z. Do I have a wedding we're trying to rush to? What's up?
I know your motive. You're not worried about anything. With the 2%, you.
All right. So then the A is alcohol. Do I fit that requirement? Has it been 8 hours? Do I have any symptoms of any alcohol that I'm under, that I drank, 8 hours or more below 0.04? F is fatigue. Did I get good rest? There's nothing worse than feeling fatigued on a drive. Imagine in a plane where I'm thousands of feet up in the air. Not a good thing. And then E, do I have energy or am I good emotions or eating? Have I eaten, given myself good fuel? Did Tatum I get in a bad argument? Or you talked about that pilot who got a divorce and purposely crashed the airplane?
German wings, yeah. Now, E sometimes is external pressures. And the main thing, let's say you're flying your mom and she has to be back at Palm Springs for a meeting. Now with some kind of a stress where you have to say, nah, I don't care. She'll figure it out if I don't get her there. What is our best glide speed?
Our best glide speed is 65 knots.
Okay, now let's say we're at 5,000. How much distance do we probably have? The method that the FAA recommends
Yeah.
is 1.5 miles for every 1,000 feet.
Okay, perfect. 1.5 miles for every 1,000 feet.
Yeah, so it's about 7.5 miles.
Cool.
Okay, we have different arcs on the speedometer. What is the white arc?
So your white arc, I believe, is your flap extension.
What about the green arc?
The green arc is your essentially like your cruising, your safe cruising or structural cruising speed.
They call it normal operation.
All right, normal operating speed.
What is the yellow arc?
Yellow, I believe, is when you're starting to get into like your stall speeds. So yellow's down toward the bottom.
So the yellow, they call it clean weather. Okay, and the idea is you're at a speed which, if you create too much G's, you're going to damage the airplane. But unless it's bumpy outside, you can still operate in that speed.
Okay, so that's around the 127 in our area.
Yes, I think it's 126 for the 172S, but I'm not
Something
sure.
like that. Okay, yeah.
And then the red one is the VNE, which is never exceed.
Never exceed speed. That's somewhere like 150 something.
Yeah, I think it's 160 for the 172S. So it's in the 150s above.
Mhm.
What do you do if you experience high voltage or low voltage?
If I experience high voltage or low voltage, I'm assuming at that point the voltage regulator isn't working. So I'm likely to, well, I'm going to anticipate that if something's going on, my battery's no longer working, alternator's not working appropriately, you can turn it off and turn it back on. But I would anticipate I don't have, let's say I don't have much time. If I'm just going to operate off my battery, I'm going to say I've got less than 30 minutes. So I'm
Okay,
gonna,
is that an emergency?
is it an emergency immediately? No, but you could lose comms, lights, and things in the near future.
Is that an emergency?
So yes.
No, because even if you lose your radios, you're still fine. If you lose your
Right.
lights, you're still fine. So it's not an emergency, but I would do two things. One of them is reduce the load.
Okay.
Do I need all the lights beside the beacon? Unless it's a nighttime, probably not. Do I need COM1 and COM2? Probably not. So if I'm charging my phone, probably plug it off. And as you said, cycle. Turn it off, turn it on.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something I would do if I'm on flight following. I would tell the controller, hey, I have some issues with my electrical that I'm going to troubleshoot. I'm just letting you know, in case you see me going off my avionics, that will happen.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like you aviate, navigate, communicate. And again, it's not the end of the world. Your airplane, even if you have an alternator failure, which is something they did for us in the sim, you still have about half an hour of battery.
Right.
So if the alternator fails, no problem. Let me get to an airport. I let them know, hey guys, if I stop using my radios, that's why. It happened to us once in Livermore, I think.
Yeah. No, with Byron. Yeah, we were at Byron when it happened.
Yes.
Flaps
And
weren't
I
working.
noticed
That's
it
how we noticed.
because of the flaps.
Yeah, flaps. They weren't going.
Okay. Now, let's say your oil temperature increases and your oil pressure decreases. What happens and what's going to be your actions?
All right. So if my oil temperature increases and the pressure decreases, that's never a good sign. But temperature going up, obviously, the engine can overheat. We can have things like detonation, damaging the engine, because we know our oil is doing things like lubricating, um, cleaning, heat, dissipating, things of that nature. So now it can cause serious engine problems. I'm going to treat that as an emergency or near emergency. Doesn't mean I'm going to put it down in the field, but I'm going to start heading in the direction of the nearest airport, and I'm going to communicate that I'm having said issue. I'm having, potential. I've got overheating of my engine and low oil temperature, and head to that nearest airport.
Yeah. Now, it basically means two things. Number one, you probably have an oil leak.
Yep.
Because if there's a pressure change, that's why. If your temperature is high, well, just reduce your power. Reduce power and increase airspeed. Now, there are two methods, and I'll tell you my opinion after I say them. One opinion says, fuck the engine, let me go full power, climb as high as I can, let the engine die, and then I'm going to glide. The other method says, let me reduce my power and try to sustain the engine as much as I can. It depends on where you're at, because if you are over the mountain ridge and you need to climb to 4,000 before you do that, then kill the engine. If you don't have to, use it as long as you can, because it takes time to kill an engine. So I would like reduce the power and see what happens. And usually if you pitch down and increase the airspeed, it gives you more cooling.
Right.
You can always save the engine for when you actually need it. Because if you're really going to destroy your engine, okay, and what is an accelerated stall?
Regardless of your airspeed, you exceed the critical angle of attack, or you go into a stall based on, you're turning too heavy a deflection of the flight controls.
So an accelerated stall is a stall that is higher than the stall speed. So now what might cause it is the G-forces. So now when they talk about accelerated stall, what they usually mean is doing steeper turns in slow speed, which, as I said before, number one cause of people dying on an airplane
Base to
is
final.
the thing about it is that they turn from base to final.
Yep.
And they overshoot the runway and they're trying to correct it. You're already doing 60 knots. And that's, if you remember me as a CFI, that's my biggest fear, because I see students coming on 60, like, oh, I missed it. And they pull. You don't have enough airspeed to recover. So that's where it comes from. Can you walk me through the different squawk codes that you use for emergency or urgency and all that?
Okay, so we've got 7700, and that is going to be a general emergency. Communications, loss of comms, 7600, and then 7500 is 7500. That's not in-flight fire?
They call it unlawful presence in the cockpit. It's
hijacking, right. That's what the H is, hijacking.
Yeah. There's a movie called 7500. And are you familiar with the kinds of icing we have?
All right. So if we're talking kinds of ice, I believe there is induction icing and structural icing.
Okay, what can I do with induction ice?
We do have a carbureted engine. So in our carbureted engine, we're going to put on the carb heat. And what that's going to do, it's going to take heat from off of the exhaust manifold, and it's going to run that through the carburetor to hopefully heat up and break up that carb ice. What we're going to see with that, we're going to see a drop in RPM. And then as that icing breaks up and water gets into the engine, it's going to run rough.
Perfect. The structural icing is when you use the pilostatic system.
Copy. Okay.
Now, we also have kinds of icing, which is rime ice, clear ice,
and mixed ice.
The bottom line, you don't fly with those. The FAA say 1/8 of an inch is enough. So that's like 0.125 inches is enough to make the airplane stall. And it's unpredictable. Okay, what are the things we need in order for us to have a development of a thunderstorm?
All right, so for a development of a thunderstorm, we're going to need an unstable lapse rate, which is going to give you your uplifting motion. You're going to need sufficient water vapor and the uplifting motion. So uplifting motion, sufficient water vapor, and unstable lapse rate.
Perfect. Now, what are the stages of a thunderstorm?
So for a thunderstorm, you have the cumulus stage, initial updrafts. You have the mature stage, the beginning of downpour, and then you have the dissipating stage, which is when it begins to rain itself out.
Which one is the most dangerous?
The mature stage.
Why is that?
That's when the storm's at its wildest, the biggest downdraft and wrath of the storm.
Perfect. What is a wake turbulence and how do you avoid it?
Wake turbulence or wingtip vortices are created by airplanes. Is essentially, what happens, the generation of lift from an airplane. So it'll come off the wings, it'll come off the tips and be cyclical. And then its biggest hazard or most created by airplanes that are heavy, clean, and slow. The way that we avoid it is if we're coming in after a big plane that just landed, we're going to want to remain above said plane's glide path and touch down after its landing point. And then on takeoff, it's going to be the opposite. Take off before it took off, fly above its glide path. That may not necessarily be possible because that plane is climbing at a rate that we can't. So an option would be to sidestep based on the direction the wind is or isn't coming from. You'd sidestep and fly kind of parallel to it.
What also can I do?
You can wait.
Perfect. Yeah, the FAA recommends waiting between 2 and 3 minutes.
Yep.
Or a distance of about 5 or 6. And if you're ever really curious, there was a flight of a Challenger flying, and then it was an Airbus 380. And the Airbus 380 went over it. The Challenger flipped. Tail, nose, tail, nose, tail, nose, tail. So 3 times. They had to take down the airplane because it had exceeded the G-forces on the airframe. So you take like a $10 million airplane. What kind of airspace do we become at night?
Our tower goes, there's no tower at night at whatever time. I would be in the AFM, I'd look that up, but at night we become a class Golf.
Yeah. Why? Because that's the way they made it. It was supposed to become a class Echo, but they didn't. And what is the VFR fuel requirements for day and night?
For daytime, the VFR fuel requirement is 30 minutes, and then at nighttime, it's 45 minutes.
Okay, and how many gallons of fuel can we carry with us?
Our aircraft carries 27 in each tank for a total of 54 gallons. 50 gallons is usable.
Perfect. What is the name of the fluid in the magnetic compass?
The name of the fluid inside the magnetic compass, I have no idea.
So it's the same liquid they used to make, the Egyptian mummies that they used to keep.
Embalming fluid?
Kerosene.
Kerosene.
Yes, this one.
Okay.
Let's see. We don't have many more questions left. What are the flaps used for?
All right. So our flaps are going to change the chord line of the wing, which is going to allow us to generate more lift and more drag. We use it a lot when we're coming in on final to allow us to fly a steeper approach angle without gaining airspeed.
And it gives you a bigger buffer on your stall speed. As far as required items for flying VFR.
All right. The acronym for that would be A Tomato Flames.
Perfect. As long as you know that, I don't need to write it down. How much horsepower do we have?
160 horsepower. I have to double check though.
What kind of flaps do we have?
What type of flaps? They're electrical.
They're single slotted.
Okay.
Now our ailerons are freeze type and
Right.
differential. Freeze type is when they take a bite into the wind, and differential means that it will go up more than it goes down.
Right. Okay.
What will happen if you have a magneto failure?
We have a backup. So the engine is going to produce less power, but we have two magnetos. So if the left fails, we have the right still operating. Our engine will just run less efficiently and produce less power.
And we've done it. So we know that the airplane still flies. Do you know what's a microburst?
Microburst. I don't remember exactly, but I know I've seen the term. I do not remember.
It's a very dense and small, short duration area of downdrafts up to 6,000 feet per minute. Do you know what's a wind shear?
Wind shear is the change in wind velocity or direction over a small altitude, like a small change in altitude.
Now, if you come to an airport and you hear there's a wind shear, what would you do?
If I come to an airport and hear there's wind shear, I know it's obviously dangerous and not something I want to fly in. So my options are.
That's it.
Okay.
You don't want to fly into that.
Cool.
You're going away. What is the composition of the air? So you know the oxygen and all the bullshit. Do you know that?
Oxygen is about 20.9. The other essentially 70-ish% is nitrogen. And then the remaining is other.
Okay. Are you familiar with airmets and sigmets?
Yes. So sigmets are significant, weather phenomenon that can be hazardous to essentially all aircrafts. Airmets are a little bit less severe and pose a bigger threat to smaller general aviation aircrafts, and there are 3 types.
Now, what kind of airmets do we have?
We have airmets Sierra, which is IFR or mountain obscurations, Tango for turbulence, and Zulu for icing, severe icing.
Okay, now let's say you wake up in the morning and you have a cross country and you see an airmet. Can you go?
If I see an airmet,
like an icing airmet.
An icing airmet, no. My airplane is not allowed to fly through icing, and that's in the POH. But you can find.
It depends. So there might be an airmet for icing from 8,000 to 12,000,
Right.
but I'm either going to fly below or I'm staying out of visible moisture.
Copy.
Okay, so it's only relevant if you have icing is a problem. You need visible moisture and low temperatures.
Yep.
Now, if you see a turbulence, well, if it's light, you can. Moderate and above, I wouldn't get close to it. And can you fly when you have the mountain obscuration? Well, if I'm not planning to land there and it's VFR, then yeah. Because what they do, there's been days when they put from California to Seattle, IFR. I'm sure there's some areas that are not IFR, so it depends on my action. If I'm not intending to land there, I don't care. Now, as far as SIGMETs, the answer is no.
Okay.
SIGMETs is an absolute no-no, and there are two kinds of SIGMETs. There are SIGMETs, and there are convective SIGMETs.
Yep.
And convective SIGMETs, absolutely not. Okay, as long as you know how to plan your cross country and do the performance calculation, I would give you 90 out of 100.
Okay.
I think that you are ready. There are some stupid memory items that you have to go over, so you can do that. But overall, I mean, I ask you everything out of these questions and the ACS, and you know the answers, and whatever you don't know, you know where to find. So I think you're set. I think you're good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of studying and memorizing of acronyms and terms and this. Things that blow my mind. Oh, what part of your eye do you use at night? Who cares?
Generally, who cares?
Right?
Also,
What?
who cares? I forgot it. I didn't know that. I have to like follow my notes.
Who cares? I'm not a doctor.
Who cares?
I'm not an eye doctor. Even a regular doctor doesn't know what part of your eye does what. What if you're a foot doctor? Who cares? I'm flying an airplane. What part of my eye I use doesn't matter. Does my eye work? That matters.
So you made it to the end of the mock oral check ride. Awesome. How did it go? Did you know 80% of the answers to these questions? If so, I think you're on the right track. If not, you might want to hit the books a little bit more and just kind of focus your studying efforts. I think this was a great foundation for the oral check ride. However, there are some things that we did not cover. Make sure you're familiar with all of the top and basic acronyms, right? A tomato flames, aviates, etc., etc. Another thing you're going to want to look into is equations. Expect an equation about obviously weight and balance, but expect a weight shift equation. So they'll give you the weights and then they'll say maybe we moved something from the back seat to the cargo compartment. How does that shift the weight of the airplane? Are you still within the CG envelope? You're going to want to know where to find this information in the POH and know how to calculate it. You're also going to want to know how to calculate things like density altitude and know how that affects your aircraft. Another question that you're likely to get is something about landing and takeoff distances and how those are affected by things like maybe a 50-foot obstacle that you have to climb over or tailwinds. Every aircraft is different. Again, this is something you're going to have to look up in your POH. I know that in the plane that I flew on the day of my check ride, I did get a question like this. And the way that question was phrased was, you're coming into land and you've got 10 knots of tailwind. How does that affect your landing distance? In my particular aircraft that I was flying, a Cessna 172M model, every 2 knots of tailwind increased the landing distance of my airplane by 10%. And this was a total of um, 10 knots. So that increased the landing distance by 50%. So you're going to want to pay attention to things like that and not get tripped up because you made a mistake on the math, not because it's complex, but because you were in a rush or you're stressed or you just weren't thinking clearly. One of the things that a lot of student pilots struggle with is weather because there are many different things from, fronts, pressure systems, clouds, fog, types of rain, types of icing, etc. There are also the little symbols as well as the abbreviations, things you're going to want to be familiar with. So take your time, there's no rush, and make sure You're calm, use the restroom if you need to, have some water, maybe some snacks, avoid things that are overly sugary. You're going to want to focus and you're going to want to be at your best. Congratulations on getting this far. I'm super excited for you. I know that you're doing all the right things to help you pass, especially if you spent the time to watch this video and take notes. Lastly, before I let you go, there's another video relating to the check ride that I like to make that is tailored to the day of the check ride, what to expect, the flow of your day, kind of how it's going to go, a few tools that I use, again, to prepare, some books and audiobooks that I found extremely helpful, and then some of the keys to success on test day itself. If this is something that you're interested in, please comment down below. Let me know. If not, I don't want to waste your time or waste my own. The purpose of this channel is to not only share my experiences and love for aviation, but to also share tips and tricks with pilots who may be a few steps behind where I currently am. By no means am I an expert, but I'm someone who loves aviation. I've been having an absolute blast. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, any types of videos you're enjoying, please let me know. Maybe you like the flying videos more. Maybe you like some of these instructional videos. Maybe you just have some questions about, my experiences. Please put those in the comments below. And as always, thank you for tuning in. May there always be wind beneath your wings. Peace.